Hello, everybody. Good morning. I am reading chapter 6. He makes all things new. He makes all things good. Of the Something Shiny journey. That's me, the mountaintop we read yesterday. So that's me. Wait, I'm going the wrong way. Right there. Sitting on the mountain. That was my mountaintop experience. That was actually the picture from that moment that we just read through. So I am coming live early this morning because we're going to be on the road. And that's why I'm not in charge of my schedule, because at 12 o'clock at the midday, we're usually on the road. So Kim advised me to come in here early and read chapter 6. So you guys, whenever you come online, you'll be aware that we have another reading out there. So chapter 6, he makes all things good. It was hard walking away from the tundra, but I knew I would carry this moment in my heart forever. It had become a monument of permanence. It would always be a place of transcendence where I had encountered a true awakening, as if my soul had emerged from a deep sleep. The only way I can describe it is as a shifting. Something prosperous had taken its rightful place inside of me. I could actually feel it. I walked away from there with peace inside my soul, something I had never felt before. A peace that superseded what I thought was true about my past, about my present, and about my future. It changed me. I had been given a new perspective. I knew this kind of transformation would carry me through a lifetime, and once again, I found myself in a place where I knew I would never be the same. I stood up with my shoes dangling from my fingertips, my toes pressed forward into the rock, my arms stretched out across the vastness of the sky. I climbed back down as I balanced gravity between the weight of my body and the weight of my spirit. This rock of transcendence had illuminated my soul. I felt as though I had become buoyant, floating downward like a vapor, when I suddenly noticed there was a sign. I walked closer to the sign so I could read it clearly. It said, "Please do not walk on the tundra." It is like a tiny ecosystem of a mini forest that takes 10 years to repair itself when it is walked on. Right then, right there, in the middle of my spiritual awakening, I was taken down a few notches. My Rocky Mountain high was instantly put into perspective. I came down from the heavens to realize there is much work to be done, and apparently that work must start with me. I thought to myself, let me do some earthly good before I destroy this tiny mini ecosystem that takes 10 years to heal. I looked at my dad as if I had just gotten into trouble. With my toes tucked deep down into the tundra, I jumped to the closest rock. I bounced between the rocks until my feet landed on the pathway that the national park had so graciously provided for its tourists. I thought to myself, how could I have missed the sign? I mean, it was right in front of the rock that I just climbed. To my amazement, the answer came rather quickly, and somehow I knew it was because on my arrival, my soul was still blind. In the same way that I was physically blind to the sign, I was also blind to the truth. I was so focused on me and what I wanted that the sign had no impact on my physical sight. Therefore, it had no impact on my decision-making ability. I couldn't see it because I was still blind. It wasn't until I came down off the rock that I had been given new eyes. My vision had been widened and my sight had been stretched further than my ability to see clearly, to see the truth and recognize it for what it was. The question why had stretched my mind beyond itself as it explained years of turmoil, sadness, and suffering. In an instant, I realized depression had trained me. I had been manipulated by its control. It had robbed me of my energy and enjoyment. It had taken my ability to be kind and filled me with frustration and strife. It had imprisoned me with suicidal thoughts of worthlessness and guilt. Guilt for all the things I wanted to do but never did, and for all the times I wanted to say no but stayed silent instead. Depression was my blindness. It made me see life through a mirror that only I could see. No one could come between my reflection and me. Only I mattered. Not on purpose, because it was never revealed. It never revealed itself as selfish or self-seeking. How could it possibly show the trueness of its nature? The nature to fulfill a self-prophesying destructive pattern could never be revealed. It would be like a kingdom rising up against itself, which only brings defeat. Depression was my kingdom. I had become the enemy, and it was out to defeat me. It came to kill me. I stood there and thought of all the times I didn't succeed in my suicide attempts. I thanked him. I thanked him because I could see that life circumstances had driven me into the sweet arms of a blinded lullaby. But now all of that had changed. It had changed because the veil of blindness had been lifted by a heartfelt cry to know why I couldn't see the tiny little sign that said, "Do not step on the tundra." How could it be? How could it be that it was the first thing I noticed coming down from the rock? Like a magnet, my eyes were drawn to it. I rushed towards it and couldn't wait to read it. It was as if I was seeing for the first time. Full of exhilaration and thrill. I mean, who gets that excited over a sign in a national park? Well, I did. And it was more than a sign to me. It meant that I finally cared about something outside of myself more than I cared about me. I cared about tundra, but mostly I cared about this God that cared so much for me that he, the creator of the universe, would reveal himself in the tiniest of details. When we made it back to the Jeep, my dad started a deep discussion about the amazingness of the ecosystem and how they worked. He went into great detail of why it takes 10 years to repair. I listened to him talking about the biological community of interacting organisms and how their physical environments construct their own ecosystem. I sat listening and wondered how long it would take to repair me. How long would it take God to repair the damage that was done by years of interacting organisms that constructed my physical environment? What kind of ecosystem had been constructed in me? I wasn't sure what the answers were, but I knew one thing. I knew the kingdom of depression had been destroyed by the truth, and God was getting me ready for the rebuild. My dad is like a walking encyclopedia. I wonder sometimes if he has a photogenic brain, but it's one of those things I love about him. We are never short of conversation. He talked, I listened, and we drove further down the mountain, pulling into the next camping site. We knew there was no way we were going to be able to drive off this mountain in the dark. I pulled out the portable DVD player, because that's what we had back then, and put in the movie Shrek. I love that movie. I had never cracked up so much in my life, and as I watched it, I remembered the couple that showed it to me, Michael and Rachel. I love these two together. They were like peas and carrots. There was only one difference. Everybody liked them. I stayed with them at their home in North Carolina when I would visit TJ. Rachel and I were best friends, and our sons would play for hours while we drank coffee and belly laughed. Michael was always an artistic marvel to me. He was intriguing but quiet. I always felt like he said a lot with only a few words, and his actions always spoke louder. They both made me feel loved and accepted. I met them when they moved on the Air Force Base during my first marriage. They were our neighbors, and I instantly loved Rachel. There was no way anyone could meet her and not instantly love her. Her whimsical nature was full of love and laughter. She had an uncanny ability to love her life no matter what was going on in it, and I admired her for that. When I met her, I had no idea of who God was. It was simple and easy. My ideology was we are to love our neighbors as ourselves, and if we can do that, then we'll be all right. Rachel's idea of God was much better than mine. She explained God in simple enough terms for me to understand. She told me God was like a best friend. It was him you wanted to have your first cup of coffee with when you wake up in the morning. I never forgot that. It stuck with me. It was like a seed that planted a desire deep down inside my heart to have a God as my best friend. As we got ready to settle in, my mind kept thinking about what it means to be a best friend. I even answered myself, well, at least in my thoughts, I did. I thought a best friend would be someone who is consistently there for me when even if I am not always there for them. I thought about maybe they would accept me, and I mean all of me, both the good and the bad. Perhaps a best friend would be honest with me even if it hurts. By this point, I was pretty sure my relationship with Rachel and Michael helped me define what good friends really look like and what I can expect from them. I realized it was getting cold outside and we wouldn't be able to keep the Jeep running all night. We needed to save gas, so we shut the Jeep off, put the seats down in the back, and jumped inside. We dumped both suitcases out, covered ourselves with clothes, and fell asleep watching Shrek. The next morning, the sun was rising, but had not made it over the mountains yet. I threw a couple of sweatshirts on to layer up and opened the door to step outside. I started walking away from the Jeep when I noticed there was a path, so I took it. It guided me to a small body of water. The water was so still. It was like a mirror reflecting the splendor of the mountains. It was so quiet in the midst of this illustrious display of God's masterpiece. I stood there in awe, breathing in the coolness of the air and exhaling white vaporous clouds with each breath. At the same time, I remember the joy I got from waiting at the bus stop when I was younger, doing the very same thing I was doing right now. I smiled and think I even giggled a bit. I was in the moment and I was enjoying it. It was something so small that I took great joy in as a child. I loved breathing the cold air deep into my lungs and exhaling the warmth from my body. I stopped doing it years ago. As a matter of fact, I hadn't even thought of it until that very moment. Why had I stopped enjoying something so small? I knew why. I just hadn't said it out loud. I stopped because it reminded me of how my joy was stolen. It was taken from me time and time again. The simple joy of taking a breath of fresh air stolen by the chance of mean kids calling me dirty pants or some other derogatory name, all of whom were from the same small town where everyone knew who my mom was. But not this time. I stood there unashamed and made an O shape with my mouth as I puffed the clouds out against the morning mist. The memory of them hadn't echoed in my soul. Looking back, I realized he had given me a gift to move past the past and be present in the moment. And all I could say was, "Good morning, God." With a smile on my face, as far as the east is from the west, I stood there in awe of him. There were no other words. And for the first time in a long time, there were no other thoughts. It was just me and him enjoying the moment and the first light of day together. I had found my best friend. The peace of his presence filled me up as I headed back to the Jeep. I wondered what my dad was up to. I opened the car door and saw that he had his day-old coffee in front of the heater vent trying to warm it up. Immediately, he began to tell me how amazing his morning was. He had seen a deer and it came right up to the Jeep. He told me all about the doe and his visit with her. After waiting a few minutes, I asked my dad how long he'd been trying to warm up his coffee. He said, about 15 minutes. I knew right then it was time for us to find some fresh brew. We put the car in drive and continued on our way down the mountain. I would say about 30 minutes into the drive down, we noticed on the right was an entrance to somewhere or something. The sign was obvious, but at the same time, we weren't quite sure if we were invited. It was made with huge wooden logs holding what appeared to be a welded iron arching over the entrance, which read Grand Lake. The only signs I had ever seen like that were in the movies and belonged on ranches out in Texas somewhere. Nonetheless, we both looked at each other and ventured beneath the arch into the unknown. The trees felt like they towered over us as we drove further inside. It did not take long to notice the huge cabin perched on the mountainside as if welcoming our arrival. We were both relieved and thankful. Relieved because this place definitely looked like public domain and coffee might soon be on our horizon. Thankful because we weren't actually trespassing and were in the clear. That being said, we had no idea that God had an amazing breakfast buffet tucked away at the bottom of those mountains. There was yogurt, fruit, and granola, all of my favorite things. Not to mention the endless cup of coffee. We had definitely hit the jackpot. It was a gold mine, and it was served up. And it was served up right, buffet style. I guess that's where commas are helpful. Anyway, we filled our eyes with the grandeur outside of our breakfast window. It was amazing to see the beauty that surrounded us. It was majestic in a way that cannot be explained. The mountains loomed over the lake below us. It was a reflection of what we had just experienced. It was as if we were perched on the side of the mountain eating breakfast, maybe like a bird would in its nest. Although we were inside, I could still smell the freshness in the air. It was crisp and gave me chills from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. We took our time and talked about how we wanted to come back to this place one day to stay for a while. It was rustically beautiful and natural among its elements. There was something special about it, but both of us had the feeling that the road was calling our name. So we got our coffee cups to go and headed for the car. I knew we were going to visit my dad's family in Twilla, Utah. That is where my grandma Braun lives, and the very town my dad grew up in with his brothers. The Four Musketeers. Uncle Bobby was the baby, and then there was Uncle Matthew, Uncle Mark, my daddy-o, and Uncle Marty, who was the oldest. I couldn't wait to meet everyone. It would be like it was the first time. It would be like it was the first time because it had been so long. I didn't have much of a memory of any of them, except of course for Aunt Carol, who was Uncle Mark's wife. They were just on the other side of the Rockies living in Sarasota Springs, Utah, which wasn't far from Twilla, but they would be the last stop. I couldn't wait to see Aunt Carol. I had not seen her since I was very small. I'm assuming I couldn't have been more than 3 when I saw her last, but I never forgot the only memory I had of her. I love you, Aunt Carol. Yes, memories make a difference. I guess that's what happens when you are small. The bright things in life illuminate your heart in a way that it can never be forgotten. Don't get me wrong, I remember the bad people in my life, but I don't think that's what makes the sweet ones. But I think that's what makes the sweet ones stand out all the more. To me, Aunt Carol held a candle no one could blow out. I sat in the car remembering her. I can still see it today. My sister Karen and I standing in the bathroom mirror while Aunt Carol fixed our hair and makeup. She used a curling iron on my hair and I loved it. I can remember how beautiful I thought she looked, but mostly I remember how kind she was to me. I told my dad about my memory and he laughed and said, "Aunt Carol, are you talking about the same Aunt Carol I know?" And I said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I am." For the next several weeks, my dad and I hiked mountains, bathed in rivers, slept in tents, and stayed at Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark's house on the days we were back from the mountains. Uncle Mark took me down to the spa, which was a natural hot spring they had by the pool in their community. It was amazing. I could go there every night, even when it was cold outside. The spa and heated pool made it all worth it. They even took us to the boat club where they had a huge RV and a boat. Uncle Mark taught me how to water ski. He never gave up on me, even though I was ready to give up on myself. Every time I fell down, he would yell out, "Try again!" Little did I know his words would echo in my heart for years to come. Try again, Uncle Mark. Mwah, love you guys. It seemed like it took forever, but a whole lot of tries. I finally got up on top of the water. It only lasted a couple of minutes, but I felt victorious. It was amazing. It is amazing what a little tenacity will do. After skiing, I gathered my things and headed out to the outdoor shower. I had never taken a shower outside. With the sky above me and the freshness of the air, the hot water pouring over my back, I felt so free and I loved it. My uncle and aunt did a lot for me. I don't know if they will ever understand the depth of gratitude for the love and acceptance they showed me while I was with them. Not to mention they both cracked me up the whole time. Laughter has a way of healing your heart when it's been broken for so long. We went to Bryce, Zion, Ophir Canyons, and any other canyons we could find, all while we were staying with Uncle Mark and Aunt Carol. As a matter of fact, it was them who talked us into going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and Yellowstone. I'm so glad they did. I got to see the vastness of the canyons, rivers, and mountain ranges. I even got to experience the world's most famous geyser, Old Faithful, shooting up some 20 plus feet into the air. To think we were walking on the top of the largest supervolcano on the continent while we stayed in the valley of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, nestled beneath the grandeur of the Teton Mountain Range. All I could think of was, wow, pinch me. And is this real? Prior to this trip, there was nothing about me that wanted to get dirty or be around any type of nature that could harm me. I guess I lived under a blanket of fear even though I didn't realize it. God did so much for me. I got to enjoy my life. I did what I could have never imagined doing. It amazes me that I was never afraid. Not once did I think about mountain lions, bears, snakes, spiders, or any other creepy crawly things. I think about all those things now, and truth is, it was a miracle that I never thought of those things then. It was a small miracle, so small that I didn't even know it was happening until I look back at it now. Today I can say that perfect love casts out all fear. But I didn't know that then. God loved on me and fear had no power over me. It felt as though God could see me and was smiling down on me and filled my soul with pure joy. I experienced so many different things for the first time, and there were a lot of first times on this trip. I hadn't lived before now, and now that I know what it feels like to live, I never wanted to go back to who I was before I knew him, before I knew the depth of his love for me. When I think about all the moments I could have been afraid, I am left in complete amazement. I mean, my dad and I climbed up Ophir Canyon, which is near Twilla, Utah, without any gear. Just a backpack with granola and water in it. I had no idea what I was doing. I was in active training. Once we were coming down the side of the mountain, it was incredibly steep. I had no idea how to lower myself without falling. I learned quickly, the higher you climb, the more careful you have to be in order to get down safely. My dad explained to me how to hold onto the grass as I lowered myself down the mountain. As I held onto the grass and trusted in its ability to hold me, I thought about the years I lived in the valley and how noisy it was. I thought about the constant chatter that consumed my mind and the busyness I had plugged into. My mind was always going 1,000 miles a minute in every single direction at the same time and nothing had the power to quiet it. No medication, no therapy, and no relationship. I just learned the skills to manage living with the noise. But not this time. I thought about how I had never seen the heights of life from the view of the mountaintop until now. I felt as though I had been immersed, as if swallowed whole, in the magic of mindfulness. Nature had a way of quieting my soul, transporting my thoughts into nothingness as my heart absorbed like a sponge the peace I found in solitude. The solitude in my mind, its chatter had been silenced, and it finally quieted. I slid down the mountainside, being mindful and present until we made it to ground level. Together, we looked up behind us, and my dad pointed to the spot where we started to transcend from. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw it was about 20-foot drop off the cliff, which explained why I told him there's nothing to hold on to. We looked at each other, knowing it was a good thing we turned around and went back. At the time when we were up there on the mountain, in the thick of finding a safe way down, we had no idea of the dangers that lurked just beyond the edges. As I stood there looking at the cliff, I realized that it is God who protects me. He protects me from the dangers that lurk just beyond the edges of my life, without me even knowing it. He allowed only what I could bear. He never let me break. He never let me fall into the point of no return. I was never out of his reach. I remained wrapped in the palm of his hand. Even though I experienced pain and suffering through it all, it was him who kept me safe. I stood there, my ears perked. I knew his voice. I recognized it was him speaking from within me, and I felt his protection. I understood it was not important for me to know everything. I didn't need to know the details. I didn't need to know every single lurking danger. I didn't need to know every single memory of a lost childhood. I could let it go and be grateful for memory loss. It was protecting me from an ugly truth that could harm me. It was what lurked beyond the edges, and I did not need to fall off the cliff to find it. All I needed was him, who reconciled my soul with himself. And he was more than enough. Only seconds had passed when I heard my dad telling me that we needed to follow the stream down the mountain because it would lead us back to the Jeep. Little by little, it became easier, not only physically, but mentally. I had finally conquered the noise. I was humbled by the silence. I had left the chatter behind as I learned a lot about conquering my journey as we overcame obstacles coming down off the side of the mountain. I discovered stinging nettle, which is a plant that causes a reaction in your body, making your skin feel like it is being stung with 1,000 pinpricks at the same time. Apparently, it lasts for a few days. I learned to listen more than I speak, follow directions because my life would depend on it. These lessons became repetitive as we hiked other mountains, like I was in training for a life marathon and learning how to run my race. I thought about the resemblance between hiking these mountains and living life. The more we hiked, the more I understood that there would be obstacles and we would overcome those obstacles little by little. Mostly I learned to listen, to follow, to never give up. After all, we were in situations where we had no other choice but to just keep moving no matter how hard the trail got. The resemblance of these hikes in my life was uncanny. We explored caves and saw some of the most beautiful national parks in America. The interesting part is how much I learned about the character of God on this journey. Before we were ever born, God knew us. He knew me and my dad. He knew we would be right here at this moment, at this time. God knew exactly what our hearts needed, and it was Him who went about healing what was broken, not only in me, but also in my dad. I learned so much about God's character when I saw Him mending my dad's relationship with his family. I got to be a first-hand witness of my Heavenly Father's ability to transform our mess into a message. The last time my dad was in Utah, about 3 years prior, he was an alcoholic and had been struggling with alcohol for about 8 years. It was easy for me to understand that it takes a lifetime to build a strong bond with others, but the power of addiction can destroy that bond in no time. When we arrived in Utah, I learned that in the shadows of my dad's alcoholism was a wake of destruction full of bad memories that littered the good ones. What I hadn't realized was everyone was expecting the worst of my dad, but instead they got his absolute best. He had recovered from his addiction by using the AA 12-step program. My dad used to tell me how AA didn't allow him to actually verbalize who his God was. The program always required everyone to refer to God as the God of my understanding. But my dad would always say, the God of my understanding, and his initials are Jesus Christ. I love that about my dad. His boldness was like no other. His words often like a Mike Tyson punch. They left you dazed and confused, not really knowing how to respond to your own hot air. Let's face it, not being able to name your God is nonsense. Nonetheless, I learned by watching him to never let your past stop you from moving forward. He never once let the stories that his family told about the years of his alcoholism stop him or make him turn back to alcohol. He always allowed them to voice their hurt without judgment, but he also did not narrow those hurts to continue. He did not allow those hurts to continue hurting himself. Over time, it was obvious that each family member was amazed at the changes in my dad. The hardness of his hearts from all of the years of disappointment had been softened. Perhaps my dad's living testimony planted seeds of hope in the soft terrain of their hearts. I am still amazed that I got to be the one to witness my Heavenly Father's handiwork. I watched as I saw him restore relationships for my dad and his family. I think it meant the world to his family to know that my dad was good. It's beautiful to be a witness, but I am only privy to what I have seen with my own eyes, and what I have seen is a God who makes all things good. The ugly stuff just seems to fade away into his glory, all while he uses it to make us shine even brighter. Now I can see clearly. Now I understand more than ever that whatever we have come from, whatever we have done, or whoever did it to us, it pales in comparison to the light of his glory, because that is where he makes it all good. All right, that was chapter 6 of the Something Shiny journey. If you want to get your own copy, it is available on Amazon or our website at twogirlsandabible.org. So we're excited about that. And then next week, or next reading, that would be tomorrow, is 40 Days and 40 Nights. So I love you guys. I hope you enjoyed the reading. Please like, share, comment. And we were going to do a Q&A with every video, but we're going to write down the questions and comments and kind of talk about it in its own video. And we're going to try to invite the people who followed us along into that conversation. So we love you guys. God bless you. And remember, I have to say this, you will always have a friend with 2 girls and a Bible. Love you, Kim. See you guys later. And we're headed on the road. Have a blessed day. Bye.